you are here for unlocking podcast opportunities, guest opportunities specifically. But I will tell you this, we have two hosts in the audience. Yes, they're going to be coming on screen a little bit later, describing what they look for in hosts and guests, as well as showcasing their particular podcasts, which I have had the honor and privilege of being a featured guest on. So we're going to be exploring how you can share your story and your expertise on podcasts, how you can get invited back, how you can get invited to other podcasts, and how you can get your message out there. Why am I so passionate about this? Because I had the opportunity to be on 23 podcasts in 2023. It was started off as a small goal. I wanted to be on maybe 5 podcasts, maybe then 6, maybe then a dozen. And then 23, I was like, yes, 23 would be absolutely fantastic. Keeping in mind, I really only started in May of 2023, but I was determined to get my message out there, what I do, how I do it, why I do it, so forth and so on. So I wanted to get my message out there. So today, I'm going to reveal the secrets, what I've learned, what I've curated over this time that's going to turn you into a featured guest. Yes, that is the goal. So by the end of this 90 minutes together, you will have a whole toolkit filled with all kinds of things to get you to be a featured guest. Sounds good? Are you ready for this? I need you to buckle up. It's going to be intense. There's going to be a lot of information coming at you because that's just the way I roll. I give it all of it, everything I've learned, everything I've curated, every tried and true thing that I have done. There will be certain things that will feel great and you'll be like, yes, I want to do that. Other things you'll be like, yeah, no, that's not me. And that's absolutely fine. This is not a situation where I am telling you, you have to do this. Not at all. It has to be comfortable for you. Why? Because it has to be authentic. It has to come from you, your energy, your personality, your message, what you want out there. So, with that being said, we are going to jump in and get started. So, I want to know by everybody if you could drop it into the chat, which is not up there. And I'm just going to, there we go, throw my chat up there. I would love for you to indicate the reason why anybody would want to be a podcast guest. Why would anybody want to be a podcast guest? Why do you want to be a podcast guest? So I'd like you to throw it into the chat. Let's take a look. To get discovered. Yes. 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 Give other people an opportunity to know how to heal. Yes. Share your message. Share my story. Even better. Yes. To gain a wider audience. Yes. A wider audience for what purpose? To hear your message? To gain your wisdom? Yes. Wonderful. Well, the number one reason for getting on a podcast is exposure. The next one, credibility. Yes, it gives you great credibility when you have been on a podcast. Yes, because you're sharing your wisdom. And there's so much wisdom trapped in there, and you need to get it out. You need to absolutely get it out. So I want to take a couple of moments. I just want to know from a show of hands, how many people have been on a podcast? Take a quick peek. A lot of people have their cameras off, so I can't tell, but I got thumbs up, so I appreciate that very much so. So, with that being said, I want you to take a moment. Take a moment and just visualize for a moment that you just finished an amazing podcast where you had the most engaging conversation with a host and you got your message out there. And you know, in that exact moment in time, that your message is going to have an impact, even if it has an impact on just one person, that it's going to make a difference. But you and I know better. It's not just going to affect one person. It is going to have a ripple effect. And why is that? Because podcasts live in eternity. Yes, they do. They have a longevity like nothing else. Oh, yes, your message gets out there. You get to share that wisdom so that longevity is there. So take a nice deep breath, breathe that in, know that that's coming for you. Oh, yeah, you're going to get it. You're absolutely going to get your message out there. And I'm going to share with you today how to have that happen. So I have to go a little further back and just discuss a little bit how it came about. I got invited onto a podcast. I had never done one. Not at all. I had no idea anything about it. And I was given the opportunity to get on a podcast and share. Oh, I was so excited to share. And I shared and I shared and I shared. I gave it all. Absolutely. I gave all of myself because when you're in service and you just give, can't make a mistake. You really can't. You can't mess it up because all you're doing is giving. All you're doing is giving. There's no agenda to it. There's no, ooh, I have to follow a script because I need to say this at this moment in time. When you just give and you give genuinely and authentically, oh, it's magical. I was absolutely nervous. Yes, very, very much green. Yeah, I could talk on Zoom. I was okay with Zoom. If you go back a couple of years and you see a couple of my first videos, oof, yeah, they're a little torturous, but I keep them up there. Why? It shows my growth. It absolutely shows my growth. So there I was on my first podcast, green behind the ears, calm up front, but definitely a situation where my feet were nervous underneath the table. Yeah, I was nervous. Yes, that nervousness within it, but it was more than nervousness. It was excitement. It was excitement because I knew the possibilities. And that's what podcasts do. They give you the possibilities of reaching that audience that otherwise you might not ever reach just by your voice. And now that podcasts are also visual, but you're visual as well. And you do need to keep that in mind, whether you're going to be visual or auditory. So do keep that in mind. Now, that first podcast came and went. I loved the experience, but there I was, not quite sure where to go from there. Like, how do I do this? I got invited onto a podcast. How do I kind of make that happen? And that was a challenge for me, one that I allowed self-sabotage to make its way in. A little bit of imposter syndrome and a little bit of self-sabotage that transpired from it because I was like, well, that was a great experience, but nobody else is asking me, type of thing. And then I was in a course, like all of us do. We always want to learn and learn and learn. I was in a course. I got up on screen to talk to the host of this workshop. And in talking, we were sharing, I saw the chat starting to light up. And a gentleman within the chat said, "Hi, I have a podcast. I'd be really interested in having you as a guest." Wow, I got a second invite. Then, of course, he asked me for my media kit. I don't know what that is. I was like, sure, I'll get that to you within 24 hours. My friend Google and Canva, I needed to hit that right away because I, of course, didn't know what a media kit was. And we'll share a little bit about that a little later for you. But there I was, still green behind the ears, wondering, how can I actually do this? Not only did I do one podcast with that host, we did a part two. So I got invited for a second one. That is absolutely golden. How you do that, I'm going to share with you as well. So let's kind of talk about the agenda. What are we going to actually jump into? Well, what you can definitely expect is, as I said, a lot of information thrown at you. We're going to talk about the stats. Yeah, stats. You need to know what you're getting yourself into. I'm going to give you a toolkit of those things that you need so that when somebody asks you for something specific, you already anticipate it. You know it. You have it ready. How to shine. Once you get on the podcast, how do you shine? How do you get that opportunity to springboard from that to something else? Then we're going to talk about where to find the opportunities because they won't necessarily come knocking on your door. You might be fortunate enough where somebody sees you and says, hey, do you do podcasts? But we're not going to count on that. We're going to search them out. We're going to look for them. And then at the end, we'll do a little bit of Q&A. If you have any questions for me, I'd be more than happy to answer those. So let's talk about the stats. How many podcasts are there? Well, there's over 2 million. 2 million podcasts. Lots and lots and lots of opportunities for you. Of those, you're ready for this? There are 48 million episodes. 2 million podcasts, 2 million hosts, 48 million episodes. Now, 1.75 million of those 2 million podcasts are updated weekly. Yes, weekly. Weekly podcasts are hitting. There's always those opportunities. You ready for this? There are 100 million listeners. 100 million listeners. Now, if you thought about it a little bit, there's 48 million episodes and there's 100 million listeners. There might be an opportunity that a listener listens twice or 3 times, that they get really fascinated with the subject matter and they've missed something and they want to listen to it again. Yes, those are those opportunities to do so. So let's talk about the top 10. Yes, there's top 10 podcasts, and we know them. We've heard them. First one right out of the gate is Joe Rogan. Yeah, he's got the #1 podcast. He has held that throne for quite a while. Then there's TED Talks Daily. Yes, TED Talks. So if you have an aspiration of being on stage for a TED Talk, there might be a possibility to be on TED Talk Daily podcast. Then there's Michelle Obama. Hers is in the top 10. And then for comic relief, there's Conan O'Brien's Needs a Friend podcast. So those are within the top 10. But there's 2 million podcasts. There's so much opportunity out there for you. There has been some discussion within the various groups, and I'll talk about the groups, that talk about that when you are a podcast guest, you should be giving a different story every single time you're on a different podcast. I don't subscribe to this. Why? Because you might be on one podcast that has 1,000 listeners. Another podcast might have 10,000 listeners that haven't heard that story. They need to hear that story. They need to hear that wisdom. So I don't want you to allow for that self-sabotage to come in saying, I only have a couple of stories. I only have 1 or 2 stories. I only have 1 or 2 things to share. So I'm only going to be on 1 or 2 podcasts. No, 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 no. Far and wide. Think of the audience. Have you reached 100 million listeners. Keep that number in mind. There are so many people out there hungry for that wisdom that you have. Share it. Just share it. Do not allow that self-sabotage or that self-betrayal to talk you from realizing what you actually want to do. Okay, so I also found that in my experience of looking for podcasts, and again, I was only dipping my toe in because I didn't feel prepared. Now, I had a media kit after somebody who invited me on their podcast. So I now had a media kit. So I felt a little better, but I was still unsure of, for lack of better word, how to pitch. How do I pitch? And within a group, I saw another woman who had something very interesting with her hair. And I was really intrigued. And on Facebook, how you engage in a conversation on Facebook. And I gingerly asked if the hair was a trauma response, because that's what my hair is. My hair is a trauma response to my own betrayal. So we struck up a conversation only to find out that she too was a podcast host. Oh, wasn't even searching for it. But because there was a connection of some sort, we engaged in a conversation that then led to, she's a podcast host. Well, I'm a podcast guest. And what transpired from that was that I was on 2 shows. Yes, once again, I was on 2 shows. So I have the distinct honor and privilege to share those 2 with you so that you have it. And then I am going to introduce that host to you and give her an opportunity to share with you what she's looking for in a guest, as well as how her podcast came about and what she does. So let me share a portion of my screen with you just a moment so I can show you those 2. So this was the first one, which was hair as a trauma response, that we got to just chat about it, just how we met, which was amazing. And then this is her passion, is her empowered entrepreneur. And we did an episode from invisible to action, passion-driven business. So I would like to turn it over to a wonderful host, namesake as well, Vanessa.
Good morning or good afternoon, everyone, depending on where you're at. So I was introduced to Vanessa by her just reaching out to me, and we did strike a conversation about our hair, and it was beautiful. So the first episode that she was on was Mindset Mantra, which was a podcast that I developed before I knew what my niche was. And the reason why I developed a podcast was because I too was asked to be a guest on a podcast. And I realized that I have a lot of stories to share and conversations to have. So I wanted to have my own podcast. But that was also an opportunity for me to have guests on, and they happened to have podcasts. So then I was immediately able to be a guest as well on their podcast. So it was a podcast swap. The purpose of my main podcast now, Empowered Entrepreneur, is to share expertise with my audience. So I have guests on there that are familiar with Go High Level, with data, with statistics, because I understand that I'm not an expert in everything, but I do know that there's a lot of questions out there for entrepreneurs. And I created the podcast where my listeners can submit questions to have the experts answer. So that's a new format that I developed to get engagement. But I went from audio to video because YouTube and video is king. So it's really important to have an understanding of whether you're guesting on a podcast that's only audio or video as well. So that what you want your background clean, you want to be presentable, you want to be focused, especially focused on a podcast. But things that I look for in a guest is if there's a connection, because I feel that if there's a connection, you're able to be authentic, be friendly, the conversation is going to be interesting. I don't like, as a host, I don't like having a set list of questions, but other podcast hosts do. And you have to research and you have to listen to the episodes so that way you're not wasting time. You're being more strategic in where you're sharing your message because you don't want to have your message listened to someone who is, or by someone who's not your ideal client. You want opportunities to happen when you're guesting. One of the pet peeves that I have when I have requests is they don't do any research on me. And I would get emails because my business name is Mariposa Sources. I would get emails of like, hi, Mariposa. I'm like, that's not even my name. You're not even looking through my site or going to the podcasts on my site. So am I really going to be interested in you? And so it's really important to be genuine when reaching out to hosts. So that's a little bit about my experience as a host.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Vanessa, for that. Do appreciate that. All righty. So we actually heard from a host herself what the challenges are, what the great things are, and the opportunities are there. And you'll see that she was able to change her direction, which was absolutely fine. You can change your direction. So if you are a guest now and you're working on a specific thing now, and you decide later on you want to change, that's fine. That's absolutely fine because you have that opportunity to bring yourself forward. And that's what we want. We want you forward. We want you sharing your wisdom, and your wisdom evolves over time. So take advantage of that. That's absolutely fine. And if you feel that you're not quite sure what your niche is or what you want to talk about, fine tune that, fine tune it, and get out there. Don't let that hold you back. So, moving forward, let's talk about the advantages of being on a podcast. We talked about exposure, okay? That's one of the reasons to be on a podcast. But what are the advantages of being on a podcast? Well, first and foremost, deep engagement. You could be on a podcast that normally is a 90-minute podcast. You could be sharing your wisdom for 90 minutes. You could also be sharing your wisdom for 20 minutes. That's a lot longer than the 90 seconds that Instagram gives you. Yeah, on a reel. Yep, hard to get a lot of information out there about who you are, what you do, why you do it in 90 seconds. Yes, you could go live and go longer, but you're counting on your audience and you're also counting on Instagram or Facebook or any of the other socials to promote you, to have you out there. And then it's kind of like one and done, it's gone. Yes, it still shows up in your feed, but it's not categorized. It's not cataloged. Podcasts are cataloged on Google. Yes. So my 23 episodes that I'm so ridiculously proud of, yes, each one has my name. So if you Google my name, you'll start to find those podcasts. That pushes me up past the other people who have my same name. Keep that in mind. So it's deep engagement, deep engagement. You could be talking for 20 minutes. You could be talking for an hour and a half. You could be on a panel discussion for a great duration of time. Deep, deep engagement. Then there's authentic connection, especially if you're on a podcast that is specific to your niche. Now, my niche is betrayal. So podcasts related to relationships, yeah, that's my sweet spot. But I also talk about betrayal as self-sabotage. I also talk about betrayal in business. So I could be on a business podcast talking about betrayal in business. I could be talking on a podcast about your self-awareness, your mindset. Yes, I could talk about those things as well. Keep those in mind. Don't limit yourself to only your niche. Broaden out a little bit. It's okay. You can do this. It's absolutely fine. So, but you want to have that authentic connection. It's kind of similar to what Vanessa said, that in getting a pitch to her, they need to know her name. You know, there's something, again, most beautiful word in the English language is our own name. Something about receiving an email or some sort of communication to you that addresses you by your name. Shows a little bit of research, and we'll talk about that. Your target audience. That's one of the advantages. You're suddenly in front of your audience. They might not be your audience yet, but those are the people that you want to be speaking to. It has that credibility factor to it. Huge advantage because they have seen you. They have heard you. They're getting to know you. And that is listener trust. They're starting to trust you that you know what you're talking about. Yes. There's higher retention. Higher retention, definitely advantage. If they heard you on one podcast, they might go follow you onto another podcast. Or they might discover you. Think of it like Brene Brown. Yes, Brene Brown. The first podcast, one of the first podcasts she did was in 2015, at least by my research. She was on Tim Ferriss's podcast. Tim Ferriss is the gentleman who did the 4-Hour Body, 4-Hour Work Week, 4-Hour. That's his claim to fame, which is absolutely wonderful. A great book, a great podcast as well. He had Brene Brown on in 2015. He was bigger than her. Well, she's now really, really big. Do you think that people went back to listen to that podcast from 2015? Yeah, betcha. Absolutely. Very much so. Again, that's that longevity of it. So do keep that in mind. The other distinct advantage, and this is the one that I love, because even though I am on Instagram and I am on Facebook, I cannot get my head around the algorithm. Just when I think I've figured it out, boom, they make a change to it. And it drives everyone crazy. What do we do? Do we do reels now? Do we do posts now? What do we do to get the algorithm to like us and to push us forward? Well, with podcasts, there are no algorithms. Oh, yes, it's just out there and it gains listeners and followers, and that's how it gets pushed up. The other thing is, remember I said 2 million podcasts. 2 million podcasts. There's less noise. There's less competition. There truly is. Keep that in mind. Think about how many different people are on Instagram. Think of how many people are on Facebook. Yes. And now you have the opportunity to be on a podcast where it reaches far and wide. The amount of sharing of podcasts, much higher than both on Instagram and on Facebook. We mentioned credibility and longevity. You're going to be out there. Own it. Own your story, own your wisdom. Get out there, share it. So those are the advantages of being on a podcast. Mm, 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 mm. So let's talk about what needs to be in your toolkit. So let me bring that up for you so that you have it and share my screen. So these are the things that you need to have in your toolkit. And you can feel free to grab a screenshot of this if you'd like. What do you need? Well, first and foremost, you need a pitch. Now, you need a direct pitch. You also need an indirect pitch. What do I mean by that? A direct pitch is exactly who you are, what you do, why you do it, and in what capacity you do it. It's direct, right in your face. Here it is. An indirect pitch is skirting around it for the moment until you feel comfortable with it. So let me give you an example of a direct guest pitch. So this is my direct pitch, the highlights I wanted to emphasize for you. So when I see something on Facebook or Instagram where somebody is asking for a guest, I will drop this in as my reply. Right out of the gate, when we need to talk is followed by I've met someone and your world, as you know, shatters. Boom, right there. I say exactly what I speak about. I speak about all aspects of betrayal, especially after 20 years of marriage. So I give them an idea of what kind of guest that I am. I put in the words engaging guest because I feel that I'm an engaging guest. I intrigue them. Remember, it's not about you. It's about the host and their audience, their listeners. So I want to make sure that I too know that. And I let them know it. I let the host know that I am here for your audience. I indicate a meaningful conversation that will resonate again with their audience. It's all about their audience. I also indicate that I've been featured on many podcasts. Again, something that if you're not on many podcasts, you don't have to say so. I indicate my media kit and my press kit. They are two different things, and I'll show you both. Then intrigued, let's chat. Include a photograph, your name, anything that's special about you. In my particular case, I'm ridiculously proud that I've published a book. So I indicate that, and then I indicate a review. So this is my direct pitch. Now, a word about photographs. Don't catfish your host. Okay, and what I mean by that is use a recent photograph within the last 2 years. If you have a photograph that you are using that is 20 years old and you look very different, you're catfishing the host. I know we live in a world where we have our thumbs and we swipe left and we swipe right, and it's all about the image that you put in front. But they need to know that. They need to know what you look like, how you present yourself, and what they're going to put in their marketing material. Alrighty, so you want to have a direct pitch where you say exactly what you do, why you do it, how you do it, what capacity, here's how to get in touch with me, here's what I can do for your audience. Again, it is not about you. It is about the host and their audience. You want to get in front of their audience. You want to provide value to their audience because the host's goal is to put on a great podcast to give their listeners value. Why? So that they come back. Those listeners come back, that they're excited about the next opportunity, the next episode that's going to land. You want that. You want to help your host get that because whatever they get, you're getting. Then we have indirect pitches. Indirect pitches are more in line with something very subtle, where You see something on Facebook, somebody mentions something, and you say, oh, that would be a great podcast episode. You just throw it out there. You will be surprised if it's an engaged group on any topic. Somebody jumps in and says, I love that idea. I'm a host. Now you have an in to be able to talk to that person, just like I did with Vanessa. I reached out, I saw her, she had a completely unrelated topic. And I reached out, I said, I love your hair. I have a pink streak in my hair. And we engaged in a conversation. And only then did we discover that she's a host and I'm a guest. Things happen for a reason. So do keep that in mind. So again, in your engagement with people, talk. Because once you start listening for the word podcast, you're going to hear it everywhere. You absolutely are. Then at that point, you have that wonderful, wonderful opportunity. So with that being said, I would like to introduce another host to you so that you have an opportunity to hear what a host is looking for and what opportunity you might have to actually be on either Vanessa's podcast or on Rosanna's podcast as well. So I'm going to share my screen and introduce yet again. So she is the host of Forgive and Thrive. Now, Forgive and Thrive, right up my alley. Even the podcast name is perfect for my niche. And I reached out to her and said, I love the name of your podcast. Since I deal with betrayal, forgiveness, it is absolutely critical in yourself and work on yourself, because when you go through betrayal, you need to forgive yourself. That's the biggest hurdle that you have. And sure enough, I got the opportunity to be a guest on her amazing podcast as well. So I am going to stop my share and I'm going to, with great pleasure, introduce you to Rosanna, who will introduce herself, her podcast, and everything else. Just give me a moment to pin you. There we go. There she is.
Hello, everybody. Thank you, Vanessa. Oh, wow. I really missed you. You are so fantastic, so engaging. I absolutely love and adore listening to you. Isn't she wonderful, really? I feel that my little speech has been a little bit spoiled because you girls have been fantastic. You mentioned what, for me as a host, is the most important thing, and that is connection. Obviously, the title of the podcast requires that level of connection. You know, when we go into very personal topics, things that really touch the soul, you need to establish the connection. And the first connection as a guest that you can have is with the person that you are talking to. And how do we do that? Well, we do it by sharing stories. We do it by sharing with our heart. We do it by being vulnerable. You mentioned Brené Brown. I love that woman. And we do it by being human. It's as simple as that. And, you know, the host is there to help you. So being vulnerable, being creating that connection from the very first moment is crucial to open that channel. And it's crucial to deep the conversation, to go very deep in the topic that you want to talk, and not to leave it in a very kind of superficial, because we always hear that the attention span nowadays is just a few seconds, and that is true. But I would also argue that there is a lot of intention of listeners to stick to an episode or a podcast that really resonate with them. And if you can share your story, if you can resonate with them, they will stick with you for an hour and a half, whatever that is. And so that is one important thing. The other has been to some extent already mentioned, and it's something that comes before the recording, and it's a little bit of a preparation. Make sure that the host or the podcast you want to be on can hold space for you, especially if you are talking about things that are really go deep and can touch you as a guest. This week, I had a guest that during the recording, I had a couple of moments that were very emotional. And it happens. I talk about mental health. I talk about, with Vanessa, we talk about betrayal. I mean, can it come any more personal than a betrayal? And she was absolutely wonderful in connecting straight away and being vulnerable straight away. And that gave me the opportunity, first and foremost, to go deep with the conversation. I don't know how you felt, but I really was touched by her vulnerability. And I know that whoever listened to that episode was also touched. So listen to some of the episodes, what the host has already published, to see if it's a good match for you, if they can hold space for you. Because yes, they are important, their audience is important, but you are important too. As a guest, you are also important. You have to make sure that you can trust them to hold your story. So yeah, I mean, everything that has been said so far is just wonderful. I stand by everything, but really connection, especially for a podcast like mine, like Forgiven Tribe, is really crucial. So if you can establish that straight away, go for it. Be vulnerable, because it's beautiful. Society tends to put a little bit of a lead on everybody that feels vulnerable or wants to be vulnerable. No, vulnerability is strength. If you can own that vulnerability, comes just like strength. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate having you here. In the chat towards the end, I will drop both our wonderful hosts that dropped in case you're intrigued and you want to reach out to them and see if you would be a great guest on their shows as well. So let me there we go. Hello, welcome back. So that was absolutely wonderful. So we're still diving in. I want to return back to the toolkit that we talked about real quick so that we have that, because we talked about the guest pitch. Let me bring that back up on screen for you. So we have the guest pitch, which we talked about. You have both the direct and indirect. Then you want to make sure you have a bio ready. 150 words, that's a lot of words. It is. Maybe sometimes your host will tell you exactly what they need, whether that is 2 to 3 sentences. Yeah, you're going to need to be able to get your bio condensed, because you have to keep in mind that they're putting a lot of information into the show notes. So you can't send them paragraphs of it. You want to make sure that you have a photo. And we talked about no catfishing. You want to make sure that your photo is relatively recent. Then you want to have your links to your socials. I do recommend Linktree, linktr.ee. It is a wonderful, and it's free. You can upgrade if you'd like, but a wonderful way of showcasing all of your stuff in one email, in one URL. But you do want to have the links to your socials. If you have a website, link to your website, your Instagram, your Facebook, so forth and so on. Then you want to have a media kit, which is optional, but when someone asks you for it, it's kind of helpful to have it. And then, although it was mentioned having organic conversations, sometimes your host will ask you for questions. What questions would you like me to ask you? I have found that the hosts that have a weekly occurring podcast that is of great substance, of great advertising, of great push, really they have a whole team around them. they really want the guests to come up with questions. It guides the host in what direction they should go in. It's not to say that they're going to ask you the questions word for word, but they want to have a general idea of where they should go with you. You also want to indicate if there is anything that is off limits for you, because there's nothing worse than having a host ask you a question that you are not comfortable with, that you are not ready for, and that you have to either be put on the spot to answer it and you're uncomfortable with that, similar to what Roseanne said about you too need, as a guest, need to be comfortable. That authenticity needs to come out. So again, if you have questions that you are completely uncomfortable with, then make sure that you let the host know that. When you're starting a recording, your host will usually ask, do you have any questions? This is your opportunity to ask a question. And the most important question for me that I like to ask is, how much time do I have? Yes, you want to know that. And in doing your research on the podcast, you can see that their episodes run 28 minutes, 44 minutes. Nothing goes over an hour. You want to make sure you don't go over an hour. And I know that sounds really strange. Wait a second, over an hour? I don't even know if I can get 20 minutes. You'd be surprised. We're already 48 minutes in to our 90 minutes together because so much wisdom comes out. Keep that in mind. So you want to ask the host, how much time do we have? And you want to honor that time. And you don't want a situation where you haven't said what you wanted to say, and now you look down at the clock and you realize you only have 5 minutes left. And what do we all do? It's human nature. We do it. We speed up. We start talking really, really, really fast. No, that's not being of service. That is not providing value. That is showing that you're trying to respect the time, but you didn't respect the time all the way through. So do keep that in mind. Alrighty, so let's talk about Media Kit and Press Kit. So let me share my screen with you, which I'm already doing. So Media Kit. Well, the Media Kit you want to put, if you have a website, you want to put it on your website. For me, I like to have a button. Yes, I like to have a button that says Media Kit, has my picture, again, not catfishing. This is how I look. Here I am. Here's what I do. Here's a really brief bio, okay, on my website. So when you click on Media Kit, it is behind an email. Yes, I do collect emails. If you want my Media Kit, I will collect your email. Will I give my Media Kit just away? Yes, I'll do that too. But if somebody comes to my website and wants my Media Kit, I would like to get their email address just to keep track of who's looking at me. So once they put in this information, they do get a copy of my Media Kit. Oh, sorry. And my Media Kit, I have 2 different ones. One is a 1-pager, very quick, says what your signature talks are. What do you talk on? Where have you been? If you haven't been anywhere yet, that's fine. Take it all out. You don't have to do that. Your name and what your specialty is. And for your bio, you do not need to start your bio with, hi, my name is Vanessa Cardenas. I'm a betrayal recovery specialist. Don't waste the words on that. You already have said your name somewhere above. If you have first name and last name fields, put your first and last name in the field for your first name and put your specialty, what you are, who you are, in your last name. If they don't give you a section to put your title in, yes, it's okay. You'll see it on a lot of things that I do. I have Vanessa Cardenas / betrayal recovery specialist. That's how I want to be known. So this is my 1-pager. Again, what my signature talks are, and then let's work together and provide every single way that they can contact you that you're most comfortable with. That's a 1-pager. My Media Kit is more substantial. Again, current photos, that similar one pager that you just saw. Then my reviews, most recent reviews that I've gotten about me, again, a longer bio, anything that I have specifically that I'm proud of. In my case, it's my blogs. I'm very proud of my blogs. I'm also proud of my books. This lets them know that I am an author as well. So these are my media kits. What's a press kit? That's a little different. Now, press kit, again, on my website, allows for the viewer to see that I'm available for podcasts, summits, speaking gigs, and a guest teaching. Again, how to contact me. Then my press kit includes my one sheet, my bio, and my headshot. Yes. So that's available. You click on it and you get that PDF. Then I also include all of my recent appearances. And the reason that I do this is not only is it beneficial for me, but it's beneficial for my hosts. I get to showcase when I was on their particular platform. So once again, Rosanna is here. And then I have Vanessa, again, is here. And I add every single time I'm on a podcast, I add it here so that others looking at it, podcast hosts that I direct to my press kit, can see that I have been on podcasts. I include my giveaways because podcast hosts do like to give away things to their audience. So you want to keep that in mind as well. You might want to have something ready, and that can be an ebook that could be a one pager. It could be anything, as long as it's free and it gives the host an opportunity to give that to their listeners in their newsletters. However they communicate to their audience, you want to get as much material in front of their audience. And then, of course, testimonials. So again, this is in depth how I got to this. And I actually have to give a shout out to another podcast host. How I came about this was that another podcast host did a press kit like this because she in turn wanted to be a guest, and she put together a sheet like that. And I was like, I really like that. I am definitely going to model that and use that. So I want to go over how to shine. 15 things that you can do right now, and they're really easy to be able to get on podcasts. First and foremost, you heard our two hosts say it: prepare. Know what you're getting into. Listen to one of the podcasts. I always like to listen to the very first podcast and the very last podcast. I like to see the difference first and foremost, because I will compliment the host on how they have evolved over time. Even if that first podcast is 8 years ago, and then you want to master your message. You absolutely want to know what you're going to say. You don't have to script it out. Don't script it out. Have an authentic conversation with somebody else about what you do, why you do it, and how you impact other people's lives. You want to be authentic? Absolutely be authentic. Yeah, don't flub. It's out there for eternity. Don't flub. Yeah, you can mess up, and you'll see some of my podcasts where I actually go, because I've messed up what I wanted to say because I'm so excited to say these things. You also want to practice active listening. You do want to listen to your host. You do want to listen to that question and really answer it. Don't skirt around it. It's not your time to be a politician. No, 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 no. Answer the question. And if you need an extra moment, say, you know what? That was a really interesting question. I like that question. No other host has ever asked me that question. Oh, those 3 sentences, that makes the host feel really good, and it buys you a little time to figure out how you want to answer that question. The other thing that you want to do, and I need to practice this, and this is over my other shoulder, slow down. Slow down, savor it, because it's going to be over before you know it. just like that, it's going to be over because you have shared so much, so willingly to share so much. So slow it down. All right. You definitely want to tell stories. There's something magical about telling stories, and you can find all kinds of things on YouTube about storytelling. My advice, Eric Edmonds. He is a master at storytelling. So if you want to learn how to storytell, learn from him. Yes, Eric Edmonds. His platform is Speaker Nation. Yeah, you can reach out to me. I'll be more than happy to share some of that information with you. You want to provide value. You do not want to be a sales pitch. You want to be a resource. Don't be a sales pitch. Yeah, you might weave in your book. You might weave in your podcast. You might weave in your website, your blog, what you do, but don't come on being a sales pitch. It turns off the audience, and once you've turned off the audience, you've turned off the host, because now the host is upset that you are not providing value to their audience. Keep in mind, who are you talking to? You're not talking to your own audience, you're talking to the host's audience. So you want to make sure it's of value. You want to promote the podcast. This is a little secret. Are you ready? You want to promote their podcast on their podcast. And how I do this is I will listen to several of their podcasts. And if something resonates with me, on episode number 37, you had Jamie on and you were talking about childhood trauma and how EMDR helped. Yeah, that was fascinating. That was a really good episode. Yeah, episode 37. I say that on the podcast. Why? It's to the benefit of the audience, because now they know, oh, she's talking about betrayal and trauma. And there was an episode, maybe I didn't hear that episode or see that episode, but it's episode 37. And she is recommending it. And now the host has an opportunity to say, yes, that was a fascinating conversation. We really dove deep into childhood trauma. Just like that, I have promoted their podcast on their podcast. That's golden. Oh, hosts love that. You want to pause. You want to pause? Take a deep breath, pause. But you want to avoid dead air. And there's a real delicate balance as to what that is. Yes, podcast hosts will edit. Of course, they'll edit. I pride myself on trying to have them not have to edit so much. If they don't have to edit at all, oh, that's even better. But, because it is time consuming. And I want to be a good enough guest that they invite me back. Because that's the goal, is to get invited back. Yes, because you have so much wisdom, and that short amount of time, again, it was over before you knew it, and you had so much more to say. You had so much more to say. So part 2, woohoo. You want to smile. Oh, yes, you can hear a smile. You can hear a smile. So you do want to smile. Even if you're talking about a challenging topic. I talk about betrayal, but I still manage to smile because I'm so excited to share the wisdom. You want to respect the host and the audience. There might be times where you have a challenging question, or you and the host don't quite agree on something. You need to practice the art of skillful debate. Also, back to number 1, if you prepared, you somewhat know your host's stance on certain things. So you want to make sure that you're not going to get into a contentious conversation, unless that's your thing. But otherwise, yeah, it becomes combative. We don't want that. Listeners don't want to hear that either. We talked about time. You want to respect time. Do not go over time. Do not go over time. They tell you that they have an hour, then you have 55 minutes. Respect the time. Always allow the host to end the program. Give them that opportunity to do so. They might ask you for final words from you because they have already pre-recorded their ending, or they will be recording their ending later. But you definitely want not to be the last person talking unless the host has graciously given that to you. And lastly, number 15, gratitude. Have gratitude for your host. They just elevated you. In that time frame, they elevated you. Even if your episode is heard by 6 people, it's 6 more people. If your episode isn't heard by anyone, it was still heard by the host. Yes, the host. The host has an opportunity to share you with others. And this for me is golden. This is a golden opportunity. So we're going to talk about where to find the opportunities to be a guest. We talked about them being indirect. We talked about them being direct. What I'm proud of is that my direct pitches to hosts, I'm 100%. I applied for 23, I got 23. I didn't have a single host say to me, you're not right for my show, or I'm not interested. Haven't had that. Now, that's with careful preparation. You could throw out the spaghetti and see what sticks. Sure, of course you can, but you don't know what you're getting yourself into. Keep in mind, not only is it the host's reputation, but it's your own reputation as well. Have I been invited on podcasts where after I've done the research, I'm like, yeah, that doesn't feel right to me. I'm passing on it. Yeah, absolutely. Did I agonize over it? Yeah, I was a little concerned. Oh, I'm passing on this. What if this is the one opportunity that like catapults me into, a different realm? Yeah, but it doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel right to me. So I'm not going to do it. Why? Because I'm not going to be authentic in my voice or on screen because it feels icky. There's something wrong with it. So do keep that in mind. You can say no because no is next one. N-O, next one. Honor yourself. Honor your own wisdom. Get on a podcast that feels good, that feels like, yeah, we're going to have a good conversation, because that's the ultimate goal, is to have a great conversation. Then it's to have exposure. Absolutely. You need that exposure. And then you need that credibility. Yes, 23 podcasts. When I say that to people, yes, that adds credibility to me. I'm a published author. Yes, that adds credibility. Yes, you want those, even those little things add credibility. Keep that in mind. So where are you going to find these opportunities? Where are they going to be? Whether they're direct pitch or they're indirect. We talked about the groups. When you're in a group, hear it. They've got a great little feature in the groups that say, search, put in podcast. Just like that. A group that you're already engaged in, somebody might have said podcast. And then search through that and see what it is and see if you can engage in a conversation. It's very organic, but it happens because what it is a spider web. It starts little there and it keeps spinning out and spinning out and spinning out. Before you know it, you have a beautiful, beautiful spider web. And in it, it says featured guest. And that's you. All you have to do is be open to the possibility. Be open to the possibility. They're going to come towards you, but you got to work for them and you got to have your direct pitch ready. You got to have a bio ready, have a photograph ready. This isn't a lot of work. I'm not saying that it needs to be polished and perfect. What I'm showing you today is 6 months worth of work. I have done 6 months worth of work to get me to this point where I have something to present. I can present out with confidence. And the most attractive quality in anybody, male or female, is the confidence. Yes, the confidence. I can be a good guest. I know that I can be a good guest. Can you be a good host? Yeah, I've done my research. You're a good host. We're going to have a great conversation. Let's do this. So first and foremost, where you can find the opportunities is definitely within Facebook, within Instagram, within LinkedIn. Absolutely, very much so. You want to listen for the word podcasts. I was out to lunch with my daughter, and the table next to us, I heard the woman said, well, yeah, I had her on my podcast. Oh, my daughter knew right away. Oh boy. I struck up a conversation with the table and immediately went into, so you have a podcast? Well, I'm a podcast guest. Can we chat? And we exchanged numbers, and I was on her podcast. Yes, that was a random thing, but I heard the word podcast. And again, you throw it out there. Hey, I'm looking for podcast opportunities because hosts need guests. Yeah, they can talk themselves, but it's really so much fun to engage with someone else. Then you want to search on Google. I know that sounds really strange, but you can search on Google. Put in podcast and your niche. You might have to scroll a while. You might also put in podcast guest application because a lot of hosts do have applications. So you want to keep an eye on that. Conferences. When you go to conferences, you're going to networking conferences in any way. So just kind of throw it out there. I'm this, this, and this, and I'm a podcast guest. Ooh, podcast guest. Tell me about that. Struck up a conversation. Then others. And this is my favorite. You want to hitch a ride. What do I mean by that? You want to hear, hey, I saw all those podcasts that Vanessa was on her press page. That one's really intriguing. I want to reach out to that host. Hey, I saw your episode with Vanessa. I was intrigued. Could you send me an application to be a guest? You're hitching a ride. That's okay. That's absolutely okay. Now, the other beauty thing is that and I do this a lot with another guest. There's another guest who is a wonderful guest, and I will refer him and he will refer me. And that is the question that I love from a host. I almost can't wait for them to ask me after the recording has ended and we go through show notes and what's next and next steps and this and that. The host will ask, do you know anybody to be a featured guest? Oh, I can't wait for this question. Why? Because I get to refer them. Yes, we refer each other and we go over and over and over and over and we circle back, guest to guest. Now I'm getting the opportunity. Host. I had a host suggest me to another host, and that host got in touch with me. Oh, yes, that's beautiful. That's what you want. You want to get known as a good guest because the other hosts will again be intrigued. There's so much opportunity. There's 2 million podcasts. There's 100 million listeners. Plenty of opportunity. And most podcast hosts do not look at other podcast hosts as competition. Not at all. They want value for their audience. They want value for their audience. So do keep that in mind. Cautionary. There is no pay to play. Absolutely not. Do not pay to be on a podcast. Nope. Nope. Research your podcast very carefully. Make sure that it's not a sales pitch for them, that a situation where you go on their podcast and suddenly they want you to promote their sponsor. Hi, today's episode is brought to you by Preparation H. Do you have hemorrhoids? Yeah, I don't think you want to do that. So make sure you know what you're getting into as well. And how do you know that? Prepare. Listen to a couple of podcasts. If you hear that commercial break in between, you might want to ask them, who is your sponsor this month? Who will be your sponsor during our show? Because if it's something that you're not comfortable with, yeah, no, you're not going to want to do that. But you don't want to be caught off guard because you didn't prepare for it or you didn't ask that question. So finally, we're at the end. We're at the tail end. You did great. You did absolutely great. We're over an hour in. Hopefully you got so much information that you are energized and you're excited and you can't wait to hit the ground running. So the last thing that I'm going to give you is a QR code for a Facebook group that I am a member of. I am not the admin. I am not a moderator of it, but it is a very large Facebook group that is excellent. It is excellent for finding a guest and finding a host, but you do need to go through it and search and look for something that is intriguing to you. And when you find that, and you find a post that says, I'm looking for a guest that is XYZ. I do this, I do that, blah, blah, blah. I'm looking for guests. And then you see all the comments. If your comment is, that's me, or me too, or I'm intrigued, that's not enough. It's lazy. Don't be lazy. Stand out from the crowd. Have your pitch ready. When we need to talk is followed by I've met someone and your world shatters as you know it. I talk about things related to betrayal. I've now given that host who I am, what I do, why I do it, and that I will be a great guest. Now, when they're scrolling through all of the responses that they've gotten looking for guests, which one's going to pop? Mine, because I was detailed. I didn't just say, that's me, or me too, or I'm intrigued. No. Give them the information that they need so that they can choose you. Yes, make it easy for the host. Absolutely. So I'm going to give you that QR code. I'll also drop it into the chat as well for you to join because it is a private group. It is very large. It's a great resource for you. So let me drop that in. Beautiful. So I'm also dropping into the chat the two hosts that we had, our very special guests who were nice enough to drop in and share their wisdom with us. So that you have that. There you go. That's dropped into the chat. How to reach out to them. You have opportunities right there. Again, we have forgive and thrive. So if that sounds intriguing, research it, see if that's right up your alley, what you're intrigued with. Or we have the empowered entrepreneur. Yes, with Vanessa. By all means, research her as well. Make sure that when you reach out to her, it's Dear Vanessa, not the name of her podcast. So that is it for me, everyone. Please do not let self-sabotage or self-betrayal get in your way. You can do this. If I could do it, you can do it. So absolutely take off. Share with me what was most beneficial for you. And if you've got a press page that you're starting to put together, share it with me. Let me see it. I'm so intrigued with that. And if I can be of any service to you whatsoever, if there's any follow-up questions after this, by all means, reach out and let us know. In addition, what I dropped in was Coaches Collective Academy. That is our group. And this workshop was specifically for them, but I opened it up to everybody else that I've had the pleasure of having an interaction with that wants to be a podcast guest because, it's such a great experience. It absolutely is. So Coaches Collective Academy is available over on Telegram. You're more than welcome to join. Word of caution on that, it is a non-solicitation group. So do not go in there and start soliciting your services. That's not what it's there for. It is coaches that come in and share wisdom, whether they're doing a free presentation, whether they've created something and they want opinions on it and feedback. They also host on Saturdays and Sundays, practice sessions as well. So you can always drop in and see that as well. So with that being said, I'm going to open up the floor to any questions that might have happened during our time together. We have another 14 minutes. I'm available. Marina.
While we're waiting for her, I just wanted to add another pet peeve that I remembered. as a guest, be sure to promote the episode that you're on more than once to your audience. Sometimes it doesn't even get promoted, and that's very frustrating that I've spent time editing a podcast and having them on, and the guest doesn't even promote it.
Yes. Yes. And if you don't have the capability to promote the podcast right at that moment, you can do so later as well. And when you do it later as well, like for example, I was on Vanessa's podcast months ago, but my press page didn't land until 3 weeks ago. But when it landed 3 weeks ago, I reached out to Vanessa and let her know, along with all the other podcast hosts, hey, by the way, just so that you know, I've created a press page and this is now starting to go out. I'm advertising it now. So even though I advertised our episode at the time, my social media was little, but as it continues to grow, I continue to promote that. In addition, what I've put up on screen now that I found my share button is the code for the podcast collaboration group. It's a private group on Facebook that you can join. And what this is a find a guest, be a guest. On here, what I also do is anytime I see a posting of a guest who's offering themselves up to hosts that I think would be good on Vanessa's platform, is that I will recommend Vanessa for that, or Rosanna, or any of the other hosts that I've had. If any of the hosts that I've been on put in an ad looking for guests, I will comment that they are a great host, because those referrals are so important. And the reason that they're so important is that, unfortunately, for both guests and hosts, we do get ghosted. We do get catfished. We do get stood up, where you have done all this preparation and you're all set to go, whether you're a guest or a host, and you're ready to go and you're by yourself because the host has flaked on you. Don't want to be that kind of guest either. So do keep that in mind. Respect everybody's time. Marina, how are you doing on your end?
Can you hear me now?
Beautiful.
Fantastic. I'm just testing new computer. Apology. So first of all, it's always a joy to be to listen to you, Vanessa, of your dynamic energy, aspiration, and the strategies that you summarized from your experience so well and so skillfully. So I do have a question to our host, Rosanna and Vanessa, and I'm curious, what was aspiration for you to open your podcast? What was the story? Because we all love story, but I'm very curious because this is, when I think about it, something like you think about value, what you bring to people, right? What was if you can briefly kind of touch on that.
Shall I go first? Thank you very much. That is a wonderful question. So I burned out 5 years ago at work. And one of the first things that happened was a conversation with my mother, who said, you know, when in a couple of months you come back to Italy, don't mention anything about this thing being the fact that I burned out. And I know that she came from a place of love. I know that she thought you need time to think about what's happening. We don't know exactly what the situation is. You cannot be answering questions. However, I felt almost as I had to be ashamed of what was going on with me at the time. And I wasn't. I know exactly what happened to me. And I had some responsibilities, you know, who doesn't? Whenever something happens, we always have something in there. But I also know what others have done to push me down that. And I said, if my mother, who knows everything, who loves me, can think something like that, what the rest of the world thinks. And no matter how much we do fighting the stigma that we have on so many topics, mental health to start with, is absolutely crucial. Until we start talking about these things openly, like with Vanessa, talking about betrayal. Who wants to talk about betrayal? Who wants to, wash the bed linen in front of an audience, right? Nobody wants to do that. But until we start talking about it, until we start really sharing how deep this kind of situation can touch us, this will always stay like a gray area. And people won't hear from that. I have to say, I got not that many, but a few emails, not reply on social media, but emails, private emails that listeners has sent to me saying, I listened to that episode. I listened to that guest, and I was in that situation, but I didn't know what was going on. Thank you, because now I know. Now I'm one step further in that journey. I know what step I need to take. And that is absolutely priceless. And there are lots of people that, are struggling. And I thought, you know what? I struggle so much for myself. And I've learned a lot, in my journey of recovery and healing. Perhaps I can do something. I can share my story. I didn't know about podcasts. I had to learn these kind of things. Unfortunately, there is not a university that teaches you how to be a good host and do a podcast, right? But yeah, it was really a need for me to share that, and it's really fighting the stigma. That's the mission for me. Thank you so much for asking.
Yes, thank you, Rosanna. It's beautiful because it's a personal story connection to healing and openness. And that's what Vanessa saying, we all have it inside of us. And that's not only me that has this issue and can benefit from my experience and knowledge, and especially organizing that beautiful speaker, that's Vanessa, that can enrich and give a strategy and kind of share it. It's absolutely beautiful. Thank you, Rosanna.
Thank you.
Vanessa?
Yes. So my background is I was an executive assistant for over 20 plus years. And as a single mom, putting myself through having 2 degrees and working full time, I had to build up a lot of resilience and a lot of mindset, growth mindset instead of fixed mindset. And so I started my podcast trying to get a better understanding and having a platform for those struggling with BPD or bipolar, dealing with different sorts of trauma, especially with hair, how that episode is one of my favorites, by the way. And then it evolved as my niche changed, where I am more comfortable speaking on business topics and having guests who are experts in that particular thing. I'm able to understand the questions that the general public would have. So I ask those questions, and I've gotten a lot of great feedback from my guests of like, I'm so glad that you asked that question, or that I haven't thought about that. So it's helping my guests also expand and grow. So I love not being the center of attention, but being able to help and coach my guests. So that's why I open up. And there's some episodes on my podcast, Empowered Entrepreneur, that I'm just talking myself, but those are the shorter episodes because it's not as conversational, and that's what I thrive in.
So which one you enjoy more, the shorter one and the longer? And it's my last question. I know that a lot of people have many questions.
The longer one, because there's more back and forth, and there's more time to show the authenticity and the expertise that my guest has and that I have as well.
Thank you very much.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Thanks so much, Marina. Great question. Great engaging question. So thank you for that. Do we have any other questions?
Hi, yeah, I was just wondering of the name of the Facebook group that you were mentioning around podcasts and guests.
It's the I want to say podcast collaboration. If you give me one moment, I'll share my screen. I got the QR up there for you. You can grab a hold of that and it'll pull you right to it.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Glad that worked out. Ooh, yay.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Excellent. Excellent. Beautiful. Alrighty, well, we got in under time because that's what we do. We respect everybody's time. So thank you so much for joining today, spending 90 minutes with us. I hope that you got great value from it and you are energized and ready to go and unleash your message out there. Just do it. Go out there. And it's okay. It's absolutely okay if you have never been on a podcast yet. You can find easily enough new podcasts that are just starting out as well, and they're stumbling their way through it. Absolutely, go for it. Practice. Get on Zoom and record. Hit the record button and say your message. Practice some questions. Get your voice out there. Get used to hearing your voice out there and just do it. Just absolutely do it. And please reach out to us. Let us know how you're doing and what's going on. And I look forward to seeing you post because you're going to post your episode as well. And don't just rely on the host to advertise the podcast. You do it as well. All righty, everyone. Thank you so much for spending the morning and early afternoon with me because I'm in New York. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Great job. Well done. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Mwah.
Thank you, Vanessa. See you next time.
Yes, absolutely. I look forward to it.